So you don't mind, you can help me manage some of the participants. I know, like when the meeting starts, there will be a lot of AI prompts start trying to join the meeting. So those ones we shall not allow them in, but yeah.
While others are joining, I went into a call with one of our partners, and the invited people were around like 15. However, only 4 joined.
We are already streaming, so.
Oh, good. I mean, others are waiting rather than the music. So the AI agent joined us as well. That's going to be similar to this one. And then I thought they should be also introducing themselves. Any AI agent should be introducing themselves. So
they always introduce themselves in the chat. Actually, the AI bot normally introduce themselves in the chat.
Indeed.
Good to see you, Julie. How are you doing?
Hi, good. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, can hear you very, very well. Yes.
Very audible.
Hi, Riza.
Good evening or night or morning.
Yeah, it's coming to evening for me. I think it's just morning on your side, right?
Yeah, coming to 7 a.m. So need to make a cup of coffee still.
Yeah, still early 7 a.m. What time is it on your side, Julie?
It's 1 p.m. So I'm on the sweet spot. It's the timing to do a presentation. Yeah.
Good. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll be getting started shortly. We'll just give a few more minutes for a few more people to hop in, and then we'll get started. Yeah, as we wait for more people to hop on, feel free to have a look at our shared meeting notes shared in the chat. Yeah, so these are collaborative notes, and yeah, feel free to jot in a few things there, even questions that you have as we go, and any other contributions you want to make. Hi, Miss Wayne.
Hi.
Good to see you. All right. So I think, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar. Today is World Refugee Day, and this webinar is organized by the community working group at HOT. And before we go into the details of the webinar, I just want to tell you a little bit about the community working group and how this webinar is going to run. We do have some collaborative notes which are pinned in the chat. So feel free to hop in there and have a look around. And just to get a taste of how this document works, I'd like you to go ahead down here where we have our icebreaker and add something. So your name, the city you're joining from, your social media account. That is optional, but if you want to connect with other people, you may want to share your social media channel, either LinkedIn, X, Facebook, whatever you want to share, and then share one thing that inspired you this week. Already I can see some people sharing, but I also dropped the link again in the chat in case some people have not found it yet. That's the link to the notes. Thank you also, Omran, for sharing it. I can see Joseph joining from Nairobi, Kenya. Julie from UNHCR joining us from Mauritania. Omran from HOT. Riza joining us from Mexico City. Yes, keep those coming in. But as they come in, I also want to mention that this webinar is being recorded and also being streamed on YouTube. So if you want to watch the recording after this, you'll find it on the HOT YouTube channel. And this webinar is also following the HOT Code of Conduct. So they encourage behavior, be friendly and be patient, be welcoming, be considerate, be respectful, be careful in your word phrasing and tone, assume all communications are positive. When we disagree, try to understand why. And also we have some behaviors that are discouraged. So any verbal, written, or physical abuse is not allowed. Any discrimination of any person is not allowed. Okay, so today we have a good lineup of speakers or panelists that are going to be discussing with us the open mapping for conflict and displacement. But before we go through that, I just want to share a little bit about the community working group that is organizing this webinar. So the HOT Community Working Group is a group that is dedicated to the support and engagement of community groups and contributors, aiming to leverage OpenStreetMap data and tools for positive social, humanitarian, and environment impact. It is a group that is open for anyone to join. If you want to join, you can always reach out, find more information on the OSM wiki using that link that you can also find in the slides. The slides are shared actually in the collaborative notes document, so you can easily find it there. And you can find more information on how to join the HOT Community Working Group. So like I mentioned, this is being live streamed on YouTube and also being recorded. And I've also talked a little bit about the HOT Code of Conduct. We'll have 1 hour where we're going to have like a panel discussion, but feel free to drop questions in the chat. Also, we'll have a Q&A, like around 30 minutes of Q&A at the end, where you can be able to come on voice and ask a question, or you can also drop your questions in the chat. So feel free to tweet about the event. The hashtag is World Refugee Day, and or you can use also open mapping. Like I mentioned, we have a shared notes document that we have shared in the chat. If you have just joined, if you look on the chat, you can find it pinned at the top. But one of the things you can do there is actually to go down where we have the icebreaker And yeah, just type in your name, the city that you're joining in from, yeah, your social media channel account, and also anything that inspired you this week. Yeah. Yeah, I don't see any inspirations. Yeah, for me, one inspiration that I got this week was, yeah, hot elected new voting members. So it was inspiring to see who the new hot voting members are. So yeah, also if you have something that inspired you this week, please do share it there. Okay. But yeah, before we go into the panel discussion, I would like to share a few things so that we are on the same page, especially when we are talking about, yeah, displacement, about refugees. So yeah, some information here that can be useful for all of us. So a refugee is a person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape violence, persecution, or a natural disaster. So yeah, when you talk about refugees, it's not only people living like violence. Some people are, displaced because of natural disasters. Even climate change is actually displacing people. But also we have what we call IDP, or internally displaced persons. So a person who has been forced to flee their home by violence, persecution, or disaster. However, they have not left their home country. They are still within their home country, but they are displaced from their homes. So today, as we have this chart, you can try to have those as references. So here are some numbers that were shared by, yeah, at the end of 2024, around 123 million people worldwide were forcibly displaced. So the highest number, actually, as you can see from the graph, are people who are internally displaced within their own countries, but also a big number of people who are, yeah, refugees. Those are under the UNHCR's mandate. There are also asylum seekers and also other people that need protection and also asylum seekers. So yeah, some good numbers to look at there. Also, this graph shows people who are forcibly displaced worldwide. That is from 2015 to 2024. So as you can see from the graph, the trend is actually increasing. So the situation is not coming any better. More people are getting displaced from their homes, as you can see from this trend from all the way from 2015 to 2024. The numbers just keep on increasing. Yeah, we can also see this quick map, which shows refugees by country of origin. So 73.5 million people are refugees, and you can see from this graph where most of the people that are refugees in other countries, where they come from. So you can see where the big blue bubbles are, and those are countries where there is, yeah, very many people displaced. For example, South Sudan, DRC, yeah, Sudan, and so on. Yeah, also this one is showing people who are internally displaced persons. So, and according to different causes. So you can see also, yeah, a big number of people are displaced because of conflict. So that is around 73.5 million people. But also we have a big number of people that are displaced because of natural disasters. So that's around 9.8 million people. So yeah, you can see, depending on where people are displaced from, they are displaced either because of conflict or natural disasters. So these are really good, yeah, numbers to look at as we go into this discussion to discuss about why open mapping is important in terms of, yeah, internal displacement. And yeah, with me, we have a good lineup of panelists. So yeah, we have Cornelia Scholz, who is from the Red Cross Climate Center. We have Nisreen from Korea and also OSM Sudan. We have Julie from UNHCR and also Omran from the Humanitarian Openness Map team. But I'll give them a chance to also introduce themselves and also yeah, let us have a good discussion around this. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Like I said, feel free to participate in the session from the chat, but also from the collaborative document that we shared. In the collaborative document, you'll see notes. We do have a Riser here who is helping us on taking notes, but anyone who wants also to add something to the document, feel free to do so. One of the sections you have in the document is the Q&A. So you're aware there is the Q&A. Feel free to, go in there and add a question that you have, but also you can drop your questions in the chat. All right. So yeah, to kind of start this off, I think I'll start with let me just quickly check. I don't know if Connie has been able to join us. Yes, Connie is here. You're most welcome. So I think, I'll just give each panelist around 1 to 2 or 3 minutes to just introduce yourself. Let us know, who you are, what kind of work you do. But most importantly, if you can share a little bit on what ways have you seen data and open mapping, what impact has it had on humanitarian response, especially in the areas where you work? What's the relevance of data and open mapping in the areas where you work? So I think we'll start with you, Julie, and then we'll move on to another person.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for this great presentation and already seeing a few maps. That's always nice to put the framework on this conversation around the difference between refugees and displaced. So thank you, and thank you for having me today. So I am with the UNHCR in Mauritania, and I'm a development officer. And a development officer means that I'm right at the nexus between development and humanitarian activities. So I'm supporting the humanitarian agency in moving towards inclusion for refugees. And in that context, because this is my role, and this is the role of my team, we're working with mapping quite a lot for different operations and different activities. Notably the restructuration of the camp in Mauritania. So I give you a tiny bit of context. Mauritania hosts 288,000 refugees since 2012 from Mali. So it's a huge inflow of population, a continuous inflow for more than 10 years. And they are all located in a small region in quite a big region, but still near Mali, near the border with Mali. And in there is a camp, a large camp that was set from the beginning to answer to this crisis, and it hosts 118,000 people. And then you have 154,000 people out of camp. So this region has a lot of refugees, and in total it represents more than 33% of the population. So we are talking about a massive amount of people that has a lot of effect on resources. Also because the region is compounded with climate shocks, etc. So because of this, there was a refugee camp that was initially built to support the response. And now, 10 years, 15 years later, there is a work to restructure the camp to make it fit with the legal framework of Mauritania in terms of roads, in terms of infrastructure, to enhance safety and maybe make it look like more urban area. And we are using mapping in that sense to help the operation in understanding what are the needs. So we have been doing for the last 5 years, 2022, 23, 24, a lot of operations of capacity building in terms of understanding like how to use geospatial data, because you need to train quite a lot of people. It is costly and it requires quite a lot of labor force to be able to launch these mapping operations. And then we have been able to issue dashboards to work with partners and map in at least at a time in 2023 and 24 the services in the camp match with the population data, and that way we're able to answer to a lot of service gaps and tension points in terms of water availability, etc., but also mitigate overcrowding as the inflow was coming. And that's because of the mapping exercise. So that's a major part of our operation, how mapping has helped our operation in supporting the refugees and the protection and security of refugees, but also entering this agenda of inclusion, trying to make it safer for the long run, transforming it into a urban zone, same way that Mauritania City work. So that's me. I can speak about more things, but I'll stop here for the other panelists. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Yeah, mapping helps understand the needs that are there. Thank you so much. Yeah, let's move on to Connie. Yeah, Connie, please do introduce yourself and also share a little bit about how open mapping impacts response in your work.
Hey, Jeffrey. Nice to see you, and thanks for the intro. I think we need to mute someone. One second. Can we do that? No, yeah, here we go. Thanks. Nice to meet you all. My name is Cornelia. I'm originally from Vienna, from Austria. I've been working for the past 4 years for the Red Cross Climate Center as a GIS specialist. And I'm particularly working in the intersection of conflict and climate. So in our case, for open data and especially mapping data, it helps most around displacement when we follow up where violent conflict displaced people and push them to move into areas where they are now suddenly exposed to climate-related hazards. So, for example, to floods, cyclones, but also could be droughts, which originally weren't present within those areas. So this is where we see that link between climate and conflict, where we have that increase of exposure, and especially because those are those displacement movements where it can be very difficult to have up-to-date information, really follow where people live and where they settled and where they moved to. This is where open data just plays such a major role for us. So on one hand, because we're able to actively map areas and focus capacities and efforts into those particularly highly vulnerable areas, which we know that they are at high risk of climate-related hazards. But then at the same time, it allows us to directly make it available to all partners, all other organizations who make use of it. So being sure that it's not just something we produce and then have with our own work, but because it's open data, it can serve anyone who is trying to help those communities. And that's ultimately our goal, to literally get any aid or support we can within those areas. And then in our case, once we have those communities mapped and we understand where the communities are, how many are there, and also what type of buildings there are, it allows us to really do this assessment of exposure, which of those areas are within flood areas, or what roof types are we able to see from remote sensing data, which helps us to understand the impacts of cyclones, for example. And then this, again, helps us to really have very accurate, very detailed plannings to what we're able to do in case a disaster strikes. So I have 2 quick examples. One is from Sudan, where already in 2021, we looked into the Kassala area, where we had a large number of IDPs settled directly within flood areas. And we're able to map those areas, overlaid with flood exposure data, to be able to prepare for forecast-based projects. So where we already know the high-risk areas and the plans are already in place. And the second example was from Cabo Delgado, Mozambique, where similarly we saw an increase in the escalation of violent conflict up in the north, which then pushed a large number of people to move in the south and directly into high impact areas of cyclone paths and of flood areas, which are then caused by extreme rainfall. So also in this case, we are right now in the progress of mapping areas and IDP settlements there to really understand that how many people are now newly present within those high impact paths, which originally weren't settled there. So that's where we see this high spike of vulnerable population suddenly being exposed. So yeah, that was a very quick intro, but in my case, it really is around that link between conflict and climate and understanding where people are.
Yeah, thank you so much, Connie. Again, a lot of mention of data, how it's being really relevant and useful to kind of measure this. Yes, I think we'll proceed now to Nisreen. Yeah, Nisreen, please, over to you.
Okay, Hello everyone, and thanks for inviting me and having me today. My name is Nisreen Mahmoud. I am a JS and remote sensing expert. I'm from Sudan. I'm currently the supervisor of the surveying and GIS and remote sensing sector at the Khartoum Reconstruction Initiative. I work with them as a volunteer. Actually, my work with Kyoya is related with biodiversity and climate change, but today I will focus on my volunteering work. Khartoum Reconstruction Initiative, the term is KRI. It's a civil initiative focused on damage assessment and planning for reconstruction in post-conflict Khartoum and then Sudan. Uses spatial data to prioritize interventions and infrastructure rebuilding. I also lead the OpenStreet map in Sudan community. In my experience, open mapping and accessible geospatial data have had a profound impact on humanitarian response, especially in the conflict and post-disaster setting. In Sudan, particularly after the outbreak of conflict in Khartoum, open maps become a vital tool for damage assessment, directing aid efforts and planning reconstruction. So using platforms like OpenStreetMap and Hot-Task Manager empowered not only the professionals, but also volunteers to come together and map without matter. This collaboration model has allowed us to bridge that data gaps because we lost most of our data and response to urgent needs with greater accuracy and speed. Open data truly makes a difference when lives are at stake. So for us, open mapping is not just a technical solution or a technical tool. It's a pathway to recovery, resilience, and justice, ensuring the people of Khartoum are not just seen on the map, but centered in the planning of their future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nisreen, for the wonderful opening remarks. Let us go now to our fourth panelist, and that is Omran. Omran, please, over to you.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you everyone for joining. Omran Najjar, I'm the AI product owner in HOT. I'm leading the AI initiative in humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. We're trying to make the humanitarian mapping more efficient and more effective by making the speed hopefully higher using AI-assisted mapping without eliminating the role of humanitarian mappers. We want to keep the mappers as the core of our work as people first, and then use AI to assist to improve their skills, hopefully, and maintain the same quality, but have a higher speed mapping techniques. My background is software engineering and information systems. Although I'm using my technical skills in humanitarian since 2014, worked mostly on digital transformation and children product support. That was with the Plan International, using technology to connect youth with their jobs, youth between 18 and 25. That was like the technical side of it. However, we had also an operational side of it, connecting with the labor and connecting both of those together. On the humanitarian mapping and data usage, I relate a lot to what to Julie's example in Mauritania and Mali, because I heard also the same scenarios in Zaatari refugees camp in Jordan for the Syrian refugees, and also for Kakuma context, Kakuma refugees camp in Kenya. In those three scenarios, refugees are staying there like multiple years. Those are tense, so that the community are built. There are new relations and even new families formed within those camps, and this is where they were expanding. I heard one time about a jewelry shop opening in a refugee camp because there is demand there and people are getting married, and jewelry is part of the culture to buy it for others. So they opened a new shop. It became like a business, and nobody knew about that business. There are no rules there. There are no regulations. It's just people expanding their communities. And this is where I saw like the sample from Julie about we need to map it every year. We did it last year, we did it this year. I'm pretty sure the community will expand later on, unfortunately, and they will be there, but not on the map. Nobody knows about them, even the camps management. I was so happy to hear for the first time in my life that there is a refugees camp that was closed recently in the north of Syria, because after the new changes in Syria, people went back to their homes, and that was the only case I had in my 40 years so far. Back to you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Omran, for that wonderful context. So yeah, what I'm hearing is that also this data needs to be constantly updated, because yeah, people are living there, they're coming up with all like ways to sustain themselves and be resilient, and yeah, data can't be like constant, needs to always be updated. I think yeah, we're going to come back to you, Julie. I know you mentioned about this a bit in your opening remarks, but I would like to hear a little bit more around how do data gaps and mapping challenges in mapping and humanitarian or conflict settings differ from those in more stable or development contexts, so that we have like a clear distinction between the two scenarios.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it fits really well with what Omran was saying already in terms of the difficulty to maintain updated information. Whether it's different from developed country or not, that's arguable, but definitely the infrastructure in place in developed countries are very different from what we experience in conflict setting and developing countries. So it's really hard to maintain updated information, whether it's for answering to crisis, like the work Cornelia is doing, or reconstruction and new inflow of continuous inflow of people in the case of the transformation of camp. So the flow of people is always rapidly changing. It's really hard to keep track, and it's hard to merge systems to mix what we have at the UNHCR when we register people with understanding where are the people, where they are moving. It's a very mobile population. The needs are really changing rapidly. The type of population that's coming is very different. A lot of kids and women and people with disabilities. So it's very unpredictable. And climate shocks are often very specific to these countries. There's changing seasons. So here we have a lean season, we have a transhumance season. So a lot of mobility of workers and new conflicts coming at the border. So all these things intensifies a little bit the changing needs and environment, and mapping usually it's quite difficult to monitor all of this while keeping updated data sets. And that comes to a second point, to weak data infrastructures, which developed countries or countries which don't experience so much conflict or instability have usually a good system, whether it's for disaster risk management strategy or whether it's registry in place in interoperability of systems. In our case in Mauritania, in other countries, I'm sure it's very difficult to both follow on disaster risk management strategies because there is just no structure in place to alert from the bottom to the top and from the top to the bottom. The communication system is weak. And so if you don't see where are the issues, then you just don't know how to answer. And I know there are innovation in this field, like I hope Cornelia is going to present a little bit more on this, but it's very difficult to monitor if we don't have visibility. And that's where the maps are important. Another point is, I think something that we work a little bit with OMS, with the HOT team, and something that came immediately about refugees is the protection. And that's really specific to context of conflicts and population in needs and in vulnerability is how do we protect them from their information being exposed in an open way. So it's really a very good idea to have, like we have flow data and we are able to show the flow of population. So the practitioner can use it and you can really see the pressure environment. So it helps resource mobilization. But at the same time, you can't disclose just where the refugees are exactly. You can't disclose where are the centers of operation of the HCR or maybe NGO or GBV center, etc. So you always need to be careful. And in terms of data sharing agreements in developed countries, you often have already systems in place and legal framework. In many cases, in our case, we have to come up with new agreements to protect the data of the people, to make sure that the data is not shared beyond the scope of the project. So that's my main argument. And a lot of logistics issues that pertain to the hard-to-reach areas. For instance, in Mauritania, it's a large area. Even the local population is very difficult to map. So when you add a massive influx of refugees, it's very hard to monitor where they are in this area and to come with tablets and and collect all the information to train the people with the right skills, things that developed countries would maybe suffer less of. So that's my my answer to your question.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. And it's good that you mentioned, data privacy, because I think it's very important when we may be creating, open map data with good intentions, but then we may be putting people at risk. So I think it's really very important to make sure that data privacy and data ethics are really put into consideration. And I know we'll come back to that later on in the discussion, but I want to turn to you, Omran. Yeah, you talked also about that you at what you have like AI mapping with AI initiatives, but in the next 5 to 10 years, how do you see open mapping or the geospatial technology changing in humanitarian response? What does the future look like?
Thanks, Geoffrey. It's the hardest question, which is seeing the future. I'm pretty sure, like, if not all, most of NGOs and humanitarian and relief organizations are around or have some knowledge or integrated the geospatial and open data in their programs, but not in all programs. I see more integrating of the data, or especially the geospatial data, into programming, especially when it is more remote areas. There is harder access to the data. Somehow that would support like a better response and a better allocation for their resources. Using AI and other emerging technologies in that context could help. I do see more of like geospatial data and integrated into the programs and having better reporting, better analysis, and better decision support. I think that's all for me. I mean, the future is the hardest to expect. Ask me about the past. It's easier to explain what happened.
Yeah, thank you, Omran. I think Connie, from your perspective, what does it look like in the next 5 to 10 years? Same question, like how do you see open mapping and geospatial technology changing the humanitarian response in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think on my side, something I've been observing already over the past few years is really this increased interest of using, generally using geospatial data, but especially open data within the delegations, within the organizations, and really linking this on the ground to operational planning. And there has been really a shift, I feel like, ongoing in recognizing the use of geospatial analysis, of map work, but also of primary data collection. And I think by now we have really managed to have a couple of case studies where we could just show the impact this could have. And it has increasingly happening to me in my work with the Red Cross, and I work with delegations all across the world, that I would get sent works or map we did in other countries with the question, can you do this for our delegation in our context or in our country? Which is for me like the biggest compliment I could get. And I find this really increasing at the moment, that there is an increasing demand from on the ground teams to have support through open data. So I see this on one hand from the kind of the data user side, that there is really a growing interest. But on the other hand, like on the producer side, really linking volunteering and kind of the digital volunteerism, that volunteers are able to contribute from all around the world, that they're able to very quickly support in the case of disaster, support in an IDP crisis. I feel like one of the nicest examples I've seen, especially from HUD, was the response to the Turkey earthquake, where it was so well organized and so well structured in where and how the mapping efforts were directed to, but also updated to the volunteers, to the producers who spent their time and their capacity to support, so that they felt like they really were doing, like, creating an impact and also sharing back the final maps. I think MFS used some of them similar, so really showing also the volunteers, what is the work you're doing and your hours spent, like, what good are you doing with that? And I see both sides, the producer and the user side, really increase over the last years. And I think this is going to get much stronger in the years to come, which I think is an amazing direction to go into. And then in my case, where I really see one of the big opportunities is how we're able to focus on especially vulnerable areas where we don't have any other data. So by being able to use open data and really decide where we map and what we map, really being able to create information where there is no alternative at the moment. And I think also here, recognizing that and seeing the impact it's having, it's really going to strengthen the request on that, but also the opportunities we're having to create that information and then work further with it.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is that, volunteerism still has a role to play in the future in terms of like data that's needed for humanitarian response, and also, the collaboration among these different actors. I want to turn now to you, Nisreen, and Julie mentioned it a bit, say like there's weak infrastructures in especially places where there is like humanitarian context and data needs. And you also mentioned it, Nisreen, that you had like good capacity for data in Sudan, but when the conflict came, you lost all the data that you had available. So my question to you is like, what do you see as the role of, local communities and displaced populations? Can they be able to engage in the mapping process, like to create mapping data, even in the situation that they are facing, being displaced?
Okay. For local communities and displaced populations can engage in the mapping process in many meaningful ways that empower them and improve humanitarian response. I can mention several practical and impactful approaches, like community mapping workshop by training locals via OpenStreetMap workshop led by OpenStreetMap Sudan, and mapping key features like clinics, hospitals, and roads, and so on. Second one, they can use mobile data collection, use offline apps like Kubu Toolbox or ODK, collecting real-time for their services and damage needs and so on. Third things can be participatory mapping, printed satellite maps or digital maps using digital tools also, and making safe routes, hazards, water points, etc. Fourth, can we talk about remote volunteering? Hot Tasking Manager is a very good example for this, when people can use platforms and volunteers in not just in one place. Around the world, they can participate in projects led by Hot Tasking Manager, and also MapSweep and MapRoulette also engage with and participate in online mapping. Five things can feedback and ground truth, because ground truth is very important to validate and update maps with community input and ensure maps reflect current on ground realities. Six things, it's about storytelling through maps by combining photos and some informations about places and also maps, and make it as a story map. All one know about this. And final thing, I think local mapping committees, it can help by designing mapping teams in camps or neighborhoods, and regular update and coordination with people. It's very helpful. So maps created with the community is more than data, because they know what they have and what the damage have, and they are the closest one to the crisis or the conflict.
They are the closest to the crisis, so they have a contribution to make. Thank you so much, Nisrin. I just want to remind those people who joined us on the way that we do have a document for collaborative notes. So feel free to go there. You can also introduce yourself in that document. There's a section for introductions to let us know where you are joining from. But also, if you have like questions, you can either post them in the chat, or you can add them to that document. I can always see a question from Grigory to Julie, but I will come with a Q&A later on. For now, let's continue with the discussion. So, still with you, Nisrin. Julie mentioned also about data ethics and data privacy, which is very, very, very critical. So, so how do you balance the need for open data, again, now with the risks that come with data privacy, data security, data ethics, especially in situations where people are displaced from their communities? So how do you really try to balance that? The data is needed, but also want to protect people's privacy. How do you balance and make sure this data that is available is putting that into consideration?
Yes, you are totally right. People are afraid to share the data and share the information, especially in the conflict zones and so on. So in our work, particularly with the Khartoum Reconstruction Initiative, we are prioritize the principle. It's mean do no harm. That means we anonymize the sensitive data, such as locations of shelters or vulnerable groups, to avoid misses or targetings. And also we work closely with the local communities to get information consist when mapping area or collecting information. Their voice and agency are central. We also use secure platforms and limit access to high-risk datasets to be sure everything in the safe way. And also we advocate for ethics mapping protocols and make some workshop to raise the awareness for the people and the volunteer to ensure that contributors understand the risk and are trained to map responsibilities. Final things, I think open data should empower communities, not to give them back. So not exploit them. It's about building trust and safeguarding the every people we are trying to support, and be sure the good of this information or this data, because it's most of people try to validate the data, so we make sure the data is correct, and also they build the trust about the platforms we are using.
Yeah, thank you, Nisrin. And I just want to encourage the other panelists, if you have like an addition to make, don't hesitate to maybe use the hand button, and then I'll give you a chance to jump in. But let me ask Omran, if you have like also an addition you can add to that. Yeah, data privacy, security, and data ethics.
Yeah, I mean, I can give an example to identify that balance between the need of open data and the risk of privacy and security. In September last year, we were in Freetown, Sierra Leone. There were like an informal settlement, and we were trying to conduct a survey there. It was not like a need exactly in that location, but we wanted to test with the community what was the survey. So we went there, we just sat with them, we showed them the example of that survey. Then the conflict happened when one of the respondents to the survey got a little bit nervous because of one of the questions. The question was about if they are living in that household using, if they are a renter or an owner, or if they have a contract. That question was very crucial question, and then people like struggled. They had like new ideas about like, are we trying to kick us away? Are we trying to highlight some of the legal issues we have? So because we didn't understand that context very well, it went into a small conflict. It was good because we were testing, and then we explained that it was not like a data that will be shared. It's like only within the community here, and we learned a lot from that. So how to find that balance? I think understanding the need of those vulnerable communities and then living with them, and maybe living with them is what would help us maybe understand how they think, understand that data, how can be collected, and then make a better use. And keeping the ethical side more of transparency and open with the community themselves to get their consent wherever the community is, wherever the data is shared. In that specific scenario in Sierra Leone, there were a community leader, a lady who's everyone listened to her. I don't think it was like her charisma which has helped, and because of her, it's when the situation like went down a little bit, when she explained to them as one of the community about why we are asking that question, and then we needed of course like to change the whole the question and the survey. And living with the community, understanding their challenges should be helpful in understanding that balance. Over.
Yeah, thank you, Omran. I think I'm going to turn to you, Julie, now, and just to talk about more again in the context of conflict displacement and displacement. What do you think is the primary question that a map should be designed to address? Yeah, what's really that thing that is the need for maps in humanitarian and conflict kind of situations?
It was difficult to come up with one single primary need, so I divided my answer into 3 parts. But I think one important, one major element is something that we discussed here again and again, is keeping up-to-date information, keeping timely information, whether it comes from the ground, whether it comes from the practitioners. That's the most challenging. And clearly, what's interesting in this conversation is that we see there are solutions, but we, as direct practitioners that are confronting the situation, we are not always aware of them, are able to use them in a timely manner, because it requires a lot of preparedness efforts to build that knowledge, build the network and stuff. So the best is to get started somewhere already, and start with one product, and then slowly you learn from your mistake, as Omran was just mentioning in the example. You learn and then you build on. So most important is timely information out of more visibility, but I want to add the point of interoperability. So we have a lot of data, partners have a lot of data. The problem is we are not always connecting this data. Working with government is even more difficult. So that's hinders the ability of the practitioners, of the civil society, of everybody to use the data properly if we are not able to upload also the data we are collecting, for many reasons, also because the systems are weak, so it's always difficult to use that information and manipulate it. I think one key feature of a map is also that it focuses on the essential. We often want to map everything, and it's important to be prepared. I think it's more Cornelia's speech here, but to map really what's important in key moments, in key, whenever a situation occurs, what do we need to see in this map? So there is a lot of work to do, a lot of consultations with partners in the field, with civil society, with the population, with the government, to be able to identify the needs and then be ready to put the essential element in the list. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I think you just touched a very important point there, data interoperability. So many different organizations are collecting data. Some of them are collecting the same data, but because maybe they're not sharing the data, then no one knows which data the other has. And yeah, I would like to hear your perspective on that, Cornelia. How can we make sure there is more data sharing between organizations, even with government, and
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Julie, for your answer. It's hard to add something because you exactly covered what I underlined as well. because I agree. I think if you ask me the one primary thing a map on IDPs should provide is really to answer where are people now? So where are they? And as up to date as possible, trying to capture the movements that are happening and seeing as quick as possible. I think that's the biggest strength and what is really necessary to start any analysis. But then I think as soon as that basic need is covered of having really that key information, that's where the map becomes more of a tool to bring in different actors and bring together different layers of information and be able to contextualize those, kind of seeing what overlaps, what is missing. Are there certain areas which are maybe actually overrepresented while other areas are not receiving any support at all? So kind of having that spatial understanding, where's happening what at what time, can be really helpful. In my experience, it really helped having a physical map on the table, especially with different actors, and using it as that almost interactive tool where everyone is like pointing or drawing on it and discussing it. But it really becomes like this tool in the hands of multiple people, bringing it all together. And I think that is when we go away from what the map should provide to how can it serve us the best. I feel like once we have that very key information of a map, then it really becomes what we need from it and how we can make it work to really bring those information, those different actors together and start having a holistic understanding of the situation on the ground and how we can aid the people who are impacted the best.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned a physical map, because I think in terms of like even disaster response situations, the first thing that people want is, yeah, where is the map? You know, where are the people that have been affected? But they want to see that on a physical. Of course, you can see it on a digital platform, but still, physical maps are really still very, 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 very crucial. I think I'll still remain with you, Cornelia. Yeah, on the next one, where how can open data of displaced communities be leveraged to increase climate resilience of these communities?
So there are a few ways how this can really connect together. One is we see displaced populations like over proportionally be affected by climate hazards because of the areas they often move into. So for example, if, like the example I mentioned from Sudan, we have IDPs move into flood areas, it could be because those lands are simply available or because it's not primary building land. So this is why also it was made available for vulnerable populations to state of temporary, but it ends up being a long-term solution, which it originally wasn't meant to be. So suddenly we have already vulnerable people who are probably in less stable structures in terms of housing, suddenly being exposed to strong storms, flooding, or also extreme heat. So something I've also seen talking about climate hazards, not just the ones who comes to mind first, but also if you talk about extreme temperatures, it could be extreme cold, like we saw in Ukraine, or it could be extreme heat, like we saw in many other cases, where again, we have those structural vulnerabilities of temporary dwellings, of tents, which are so much more exposing the people living there and end up living there long-term in many cases. Suddenly having climate hazards amplified kind of on top of already the displacement. So what we're able to do with open mapping is on one hand, and we had a pilot project in Timor-Leste where we really looked into what information of structural buildings are we able to collect with OpenStreetMap to help us understand the exposure to climate-related hazards. So in terms, for example, of structural vulnerability of houses to flooding, it really helps understand how high off the ground buildings are. So we saw in many cases in Southeast Asia that often the kind of original structure of traditional houses are actually 1 meter or more above the ground. So a small-scale flood is not going to cause any damage. But if we have informal settlements, which are for example, natural material built houses on the ground, they would immediately be taken away by the flood. So we started to collect certain indicators, for example, the minimum height of the building off the ground, to then run an exposure analysis, which really took into account the type of building and how it's built and what materials it's made of. So also if you look into roof materials, it helps us on one hand understand cyclone impacts because certain materials and structures are much more vulnerable to be taken away by strong storms, but also in terms of heat reflection or reflection of sunlight. So which of these dwellings or structures are more vulnerable than to extreme heat, to stress, ventilation, or similar. So in terms of using also OpenStreetMap, not just to record where buildings are, but then going a step further and collecting certain indicators, it really helps us to understand, for example, what neighborhoods are more exposed to certain climate hazards, but also in a very kind of almost traditional sense, really understanding, for example, flood exposure, where we're able to look into flood data and know which part of the settlement is going to get flooded, which part is, for example, on higher ground, so that we are really able to prepare, and in case of an event, prepare for evacuation routes, for example, also sites where people can stay during or find shelter during the events, but also having an estimate in a worst case, how many new displaced population are we probably looking at, and where are safe places we could move them to. So really not just responding to a disaster, but being able to anticipating in the case of a disaster, what would happen, and already being prepared for that case and having the information already available. And this is where open data and on one hand, the freedom to decide where and what we map and tailoring that to our needs to understand those very specific cases. But also, like we mentioned at the beginning, being able to have that openly so that all other organizations are equally able to access this information is just a huge capacity, which provides a lot of additional insights, and especially around climate hazards, where we see them increase over time and over the next years, it's becoming really vital.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. I think it's very empowering to hear from a perspective of data user how they make use of data, because I think in the open mapping community we have like data users, but also have data creators, and I think people who create the data sometimes don't have the insights of how the data can be useful. So when you mention like adding more indicators, for example, if someone has mapped a building, adding like a roof structure or how many building levels it is, like that can be useful information to, to predict things that are going to happen. So thank you so much for those insights. I think it sounds good from someone who is a data creator to hear how the data that they create can really be used. So I think we are going to go now into 2A. Yeah, so the people who are participating in this, thanks all for joining. And now it's your time actually to join the conversation, ask questions to the panelists, or even add on contributions to what they have been sharing. Already we have some good number of questions in the collaborative document. And yeah, thank you, everyone who has asked questions. So first, I just want to encourage those who have questions to drop them in the chat, but we'll go ahead with these that are already available. So yeah, the first one I think is for Julie. Yeah, someone mentioned that I think I've been doing some mapping in the camp that you mentioned. So someone is doing some mapping in the camp that Julie mentioned. And it looks like quite a novel project with quite unique map features like postal areas and water structure. The question is, do you make use of any of the OSM data?
So thanks a lot for the question. So no, we haven't used OMS data simply because, as I said, it's a very heavy logistically project, right? So you start with zero capacity, with not knowing a lot. You train people, you sensibilize the population and the government, and that takes already a year. And then you take another year to design your system and what you want to know. You get resources. So we work with the Geneva Technical Hub and with Action Control Afin in this situation. So you build collaborations, and then eventually you train people to go to the field and do the mapping. So all of this takes a lot of time. We use the dashboard. So we work with field maps from ArcGIS and CART ONG to support this data collection. But it was definitely, and also ACF, Action Control Afin data set. So we managed to also mix different sources, even so it brought a lot of challenges because they didn't have the same type of data. So it comes with a lot of challenging at every step of the way. So we haven't yet progressed toward using OMS data for OpenStreetMap OSM data for this project. Nevertheless, we are thinking of using it for a much bigger project out of camp that we are developing to use OSM data a bit like the other panels were describing, for hard to reach areas and places where we really have nothing at this point, and start scrapping a little bit what's there and building on the OSM opportunity to map services, etc. So work in progress, it takes time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you for asking as well, Gregory. And I think the next question is also a bit related to that. Yeah, what are the reasons why organizations were not using as much open data in the past? And I think we can answer this in two ways. Like, are they using open data now? And if they are, yeah, why didn't they use much open data in the past? I wonder who would like to take this one on from the panelists. Yes, Omran.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I think like humanitarian mapping is more expanded after the Haiti earthquake. So that's like 15 years ago, since 2029. And from that start, I think people started seeing, I don't want to call them success story. I want to call them like impact stories. So when using that data and seeing the impact story, that inspires other organizations, from my perspective, to use more data, and they're more integrating that into their responses. I think, the more we share about using open data within our programs from different organizations who are here, the more it will inspire also others to look for that open data and then come and ask. And then when they ask, what is available, what is open is achievable, and then they can build on the top of that. Over.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Julie, I think you have an addition.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just a small addition. I think we do sometimes use open data, but maybe not the way other people can use it. Like, for instance, with the UNHCR, we do the flow monitoring. So it's not like we are sharing the data openly, but there are every month reports that allow the partners to see exactly what was the movement of population in and out of the country, sometimes at the very disaggregated level. So not feasible for reasons of protection and not very specific and granular, but we still are very interested and very enthusiastic about using data and sharing it with the population while keeping the balance with protection for refugees.
Thank you. Connie?
One of the biggest challenges we face in conflict context is the question around do no harm and data security. So, for example, with Ukraine, where we saw that Ukraine asked the OSM community to please stop halting any data updates or editing after the invasion. I feel like that's for me also one of the examples where really the country actively asked for it for very specific reasons. And as another example I saw was when it was around IDP communities being exposed to flooding, where at the same time we're asked not to make it public because it could put the community actually at risk of being displaced again by authorities because they should not be within flood areas. And by making this openly documented, the authority would have to act on it to be accountable. But there would not have been an alternative for the people where to go. So just to name two quick examples, and especially in conflict context, or when it comes to also informal settlements in terms of land rights, it can also expose either vulnerable populations, or if it's military context, it could provide a use which we don't intend for, especially humanitarians. So having a very rigorous assessment of how this information could be used in any possible way and what data we make available openly or on what aggregation level or what additional information is shared. It's just, especially in conflict context, always a really sensitive topic. And I know that for a couple of cases, the unknown of if this could be used at all in a bad way would already halt doing any mapping at all. So I feel like now using open data and becoming more sensitive and also more aware of how we can do this in a very safe and a lot of thought goes into it, just really also improved advancing with it. I think now there's really a lot of development in it where we see what is possible And how can we use this in a more open space?
Yeah, thank you, Con, for that perspective. I remember very well that example you gave of, mapping, places that are vulnerable to flooding, for example. I've done mapping in some cities, and you want to do community mapping, you want to get the community involved in the mapping, but how do you convince them that, yeah, once they created this data, make it open and available again, the government is not going to use it against them and, evict them from the areas where they stay. So they want to contribute to the data, but then it also comes with risks that are beyond their control. Yeah, there is also a question. I think someone addressed it to Connie and also to Nesreen. I think there are two questions. So yeah, the first one is, what role do you see for geospatial analysis in improving resource allocation and decision making in refugee camps or conflict zones? And the second one is, given the dynamic nature of conflict zones, how do you ensure that open maps stay up to date and accurate, especially when new displacement patterns emerge? So yeah, maybe we can answer one and this one can answer the other.
Sure, I'm happy to start at the first one. A lot of, especially geospatial analysis, and when we have the information, where it becomes particularly useful is on priority analysis. So when we do have capacities, but we know they are not going to just cover all the needs that are there, but to identify where and what and how are the highest needs, and then direct it at the right time and place. Using geospatial information is particularly useful for that. So we've been using this across countries to really understand where our highest needs, also thinking about, for example, extreme temperatures, which can vary quite a lot across different regions. Or a recent study I was working on, for example, was in Mali, looking into water boreholes, which were providing displaced communities, which were displaced by conflict. And we had 73 boreholes across the whole country, and tried to understand with climate impacts, so with precipitation rates, with temperature, but also with conflict impacts, so physical destruction to certain boreholes, or the communities not being able to access certain boreholes because they were within conflict areas. Which of those boreholes would soonest fail to serve those communities, and therefore would be prioritized for intervention or for taking alternative sources. And all of this was done through geospatial analysis and intersecting where the communities are, what is our climate information, what are the capacities of the different structures, where is conflict, and then bringing this all together in a priority analysis to really make sure those resources are directed to the right places. Nesreen, you have something to add?
Okay, thank you. These are crucial questions. So especially for those who, of us working at the intersection of displacement, data, and humanitarian response. First, on the role of geospatial analysis in refugee camps and conflict zones, it's absolutely essential. So mapping helps identify service gaps, tracks access to clean water, education, healthcare, and even monitor population density to prevent overcrowding with real time or near real time spatial data. We can prioritize the allocation of limited resources, such as placing health centers where the need is greatest. Nowadays, or before a few weeks in Sudan, the cholera is in the large numbers. So it's very critical to establish a small health care center and so on. So also to ensure food distribution points are accessible for women and children. Now, regarding the dynamic nature of conflict zone, yes, the challenge to keep maps accurate when displacement patterns shift overnight. In our work, including the Khartoum Reconstruction Initiative, we have found that the community-led mapping is the most sustainable solution. So engaging displaced people themselves, diaspora communities, or volunteer on the ground allows us to repeatedly validate and update maps as the situation changes. Also, satellite imagery, sources, reporting, and even mobile phone. All those things help us triangulate the last conditions.
Yeah,
I hope I answered.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Nisreen. Yeah, and we do have also a question on data privacy. So, yeah, on data privacy in a refugee camp, someone thinks that you can share like hospitals, water sources, police, and other data sets, but how do you make sure that the data that is used for the intended use? Omran, I don't know if you have a perspective on this.
I think someone answered that question in the chat also here in Google Meet. I will second their answer because they're referring more of having the data owned by the community themselves, and then the community themselves who are making that decision and giving the consent to share this data. Now, there is another struggle behind that. After they consent sharing the data with someone or an organization, is it how much do we trust that they will be using the data for the intended reuse? I think that will be more of the trust for the community. It's like more of ethical actions, more of, I mean, if the doctors will have the vow at the beginning of starting their career, it's going to be also the same for a humanitarian respondent to have to respect the decisions of communities when they get this data and use it for that intention. Building that trust with the community is crucial to get that consent. And it is always, I mean, in any community, there is always a community leader. It's the nature of a human. So I think that could also leverage how the communication is done with the community rather than like talking to different people. Hopefully that will add something over.
Yeah, data ownership. Yeah, who owns the data? I think, yeah, I put it very right. If the community owns the data, then they are directly responsible for how it's used. The next question I think is addressed to, yeah, either Connie or Nisreen. How do you work with volunteer teams? How do you build capacity? How do you do recruitment? But also, how do you deal with misinformation during disasters or shocks that can come from unverified sources?
Can I start?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. That is really important question. In my work with the KRI, Khartoum Reconstruction Initiative, we rely heavily on volunteer mappers. Sorry, many of whom are young professionals and students, and also work outside Sudan, so they have a very good experience and good knowledge about their work and so on, or people who have been displaced themselves. We build capacity by offering hands-on training on OpenStreetMap, for example, and deal with the satellite image interpretation and validation tools like MapRoulette and MapSweep, and we focus also on the hot task manager. And we do many mapathons, and I think it was very successful mapathons as a series with those people, and they get benefits and add more and contribute to the projected what the projects was shared. So also what works best for us is peer-to-peer learning approach, and we have sometimes sessions about training sessions, and we have some questions and answer and like quiz, and give we can say it's present to be them, to encourage them to contribute and to share their knowledge with others. So we pair experience contribution with the new volunteers also, and emphasize the purpose behind every task. For example, mapping damage building is not just a technical step; it directly supports recovery planning and shelter assessment and service restoration. That motivates very and really drives commitment. I think the second part is for the requirement, we work through universities, local networks, and sometimes during and through social media platforms, and also sometimes just word of mouth. It can plays a big role to people from Sudan who are now abroad but still want to contribute to rebuilding their homes. They focus to contribute and to share their knowledge also. I think the third part is about misinformation. When it comes to misinformation, especially during conflict or disaster, we take it very seriously. We have seen how unverified reports and inaccurate mapping can lead to misallocation for aid or worse, increasing risk, for example. That's why we train our team in data ethics and validation, and we encourage them to focus more than. We also cross-check with field reports and ground truth and satellite imagery and trusted local sources before using or publishing these data. At the end of the day, we can say open mapping is powerful, but it has also to be responsible. When volunteers understand that their data shapes decisions and support decision makers on the ground, they become more careful, more engaged, and more proud of what they are building and they are doing.
Thank you very much, Nisreen. I think, yeah, Omran, I think I have something to add, yes. And
I just related to what Nisreen mentioned about the Sudanese want to map in their home country, although they are out. I have a name for that. It's called nostalgia mapping, where like those who will go and map the nostalgia and the memories from the past. That's, I mean, normally in our villages, we don't share location. I have never shared a location that is near to my house because I don't need to do that. I normally, it's beside the clinic, it's after the doctor, it's beside that shop, it's beside our friend's house. This is how we share location. However, when we went out, it turned out we forgot because it has been 14 years, at least like for me to go back to my country. And then we forgot the routes and how we can navigate. And this is where we came back and did the nostalgia mapping. Thank you, Nisreen. Over.
You are good.
Yeah,
you can
reach
your country very soon.
Nostalgia mapping. That's a good new term. Umran, I'm sure it's gonna be used in open mapping going on. Yes, Connie, I think you have something also to share.
I love the term as well. I think that's great. Maybe there's something like homesickness mapping as well. Yeah, I wanted to add on the question and how especially we connect on and training on the field, on the ground and with the field teams. So in Timor-Leste, what we did is that we connected with the Red Cross youth volunteer groups who are usually present in all of the communities and are volunteering with the Red Cross, mostly around health services. But they have a really strong community and quite large groups. And at the same time, we got in touch with the OpenStreetMap team from Timor-Leste, who majority was young students at university who have started the OSM chapter and helped different organizations map. And we started to pair them up. So we would have one of the university OSM mappers with one of the Red Cross volunteers from the villages mapped together. And it was such an amazing combination because the students from university had amazing technical knowledge. Like they were pro mappers, they knew exactly how to use the field tools, how to work in areas where there was no data availability offline and similar. While the youth volunteers from Red Cross, they didn't have any technical experience, but they had amazing local knowledge because it was their villages and they had grown up there. They knew exactly where the buildings were, where the routes were, where the high-risk areas were, and similar. So by teaming them up together, it just makes this really nice combination where we're able to connect the two different types of capacity. And it was a really, really nice experience where we had amazing data quality come out of it as well in the end.
Thank you for sharing, Connie. I just remembered an example that a colleague shared, I think from the field trip from Freetown, Sierra Leone, where Omran also mentioned they went mapping that someone uploaded that at OpenStreetMap, and then where there is source, they put the word "I live here," you know. So like it's a local knowledge, someone lives there. So I think that's one of the solutions of misinformation, because the person who lives there is actually the one that's adding the data to the map. And yeah, I think that combination of getting like students and then local community volunteers is a very good model that can be replicated. Yeah, and there is a question, I think, for either any or to anyone on the panel. Does anyone have experience mapping supply chains for humanitarian aid access or informal trade routes? If so, could you share the context, approach, and whether it involved open source methods? I'm going to go to you, Omran. I think you have a comment, but also if you want, you can also answer that particular question.
It's not the exact answer, but it might be close. I know that Heidelberg Institute for Geospatial Information, they're working on a project to use AI-assisted mapping and the crowdsource open source tools to map the status of the roads. And in the goal that they're working on, like the wider theory of change is helping more access for aid. It's not like specifically related to trade routes and informal trade routes, but I believe they both are related to the road status, the accessibility of the road, and how the navigation works in that context. I'm not sure who asked, but that one is one of the answers. I think Raza can add the links in the chat. I can contribute those to the chat as well, to the documentation, sorry. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Omran. And yeah, if anyone else also on the panel has any thing they want to add on that, especially in response to the question, yeah, mapping supply chains for humanitarian aid access or informal trade routes.
We have not done that, but I'm very interested in if someone from even not necessarily from the panel, but from the listeners have done it. We'd love to get some documentation or anything. It's very important, especially on cross-border trade routes. So don't hesitate to share.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Julie. Please, anyone on the participants, if anyone interested in that discussion, please, you can get in touch. And yeah, there is actually a section in our document for notes for references. So if you have like any documentation, reports, blogs, any documentation about this topic that is related to the work that you are doing, feel free to drop some links where people can find them. Yes, I think we have about 5 minutes to go. Yeah, there is one question: how do you work and interact with governments? I'm just going to give that opportunity. If there's anyone on the panel who works with government, please, you can put up your hand and let us know how do you work and interact with government, especially in the context of conflict and displacement.
Yeah, so sorry, it was my question actually, because our mandate in our work is to work a lot on inclusivity, which means and sustainability. So we work a lot with governments for our operations. And I was wondering, with all the input from the other panelists, how they interact not only with community, but also trying to move away from donor dependent or from very costly intervention, and make sure that the capacity of the government are also built around mapping technology, etc.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. I think other panelists, if anyone wants to jump in, I think Ms. Rini, you used to work with government as well. Maybe you have also some comment on that. How can different organizations work with government?
Yes, for me, I was work with government as a GIS engineer in the General Directorate of Surveying. But after the war, we lost our jobs. But I hope we can very soon we can come back and also make a difference and help and contribute to rebuilding our capital city and also other states. in Sudan. So for now, as I work as a volunteer with the KRI, the administration of KRI start to open channels with the governments, and also nowadays we have a new government, a new prime minister, and so on. So they emphasize what we done and what the goals and what we need to do. So they make many of communicate with the government sector, and also start. I think before 1 month ago, we start a health project, and they establish a BMI office, and prepare to focus on the health sector, especially on the hospitals inside the Khartoum state, to rehabilitation and reconstruction. Many of these hospitals, because it's very need to open it and enter the service, because the spread of these diseases and so on. So this one example for the efforts and the channel with the government.
Thank you, Mr. So we are coming to the close of our session, but yeah, as we do, I'm just going to ask our wonderful panelists, each of you in about a minute, just to give us a closing remark, like what's the takeaway that you want to give to the people who are listening in to go, to stay with. So maybe Julie, you can start, and then we shall go to Connie, and then Omran, and then lastly, Nisrin. Yes.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'll be very quick. So I'll finish on this link with the government. I think it's important that they own the tools too, and that we build capacity for governments also to be able to own this and move away a bit from donor dependence, even though we have to capitalize on skills. Maybe not as UNHCR, but everybody. Like a lot of institutions are able to give great recommendations, but it's important to not work isolated and on single projects, but build capacity of governments. And then I really enjoy this type of conversations, and I hope we can do more like this, or at least participate. I know that UNDP has data talks every Thursday that are open to everybody, and I hope I can participate to more like this, because you answered a lot of questions that I was asking myself for on operations. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. If there is a link to those open discussions that are happening, please drop it in the notes so that other people can find it and also join in those discussions, so that we continue this conversation. Connie?
Thanks, Jeffrey and Julie. Yeah, from my side, I would, if there's one thing I hope for the audience to really take away, is how open data in GIS can be such a powerful tool, and how it's evolving at the moment. And also for those in the audience who are in a position where they're able to use or request or even create open data, to really be proactive in that, and also creative, and seeing what information we're able to, on one hand, collect, but also how can we leverage this in the humanitarian space to make our intervention as accurate, up to date, and also as timely as we can. So I really think that there is a huge innovation and potential to come in the next years. And yeah, I really hope this conversation is continuing with our panelists, with our audience, and being part of that.
Thank you, Connie. Yes, Omran.
I want to take this back to your first slide, Jeffrey, the one which has the trend of increasing number of refugees. I just want to wish I have a magic stick and I end that today.
For me, thank you all for joining us today, and for being part of this important conversation on open mapping and its role in humanitarian response and displacement. A heartfelt thanks to our panelists, organizers. Special thanks for you, Jeffrey, for the good moderator. and especially to the audience for your time, your questions, and your commitment. Let's keep mapping for impact, for justice, and for those who need it most. And thank you again. Stay safe and stay connected.
Yes, thank you so much. You can see the reactions from the participants. I think they have really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much also everyone who has stayed with us till the end. Yeah, it's World Refugee Day, but it's good to have these kinds of conversation, and let us keep mapping those who contribute to the maps and also those who do respond to IDP and refugee situations in different ways in your work. Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, that marks the end of our session. I'll stop the recording now and also the live stream. But yeah, if anyone wants to stay for a few more minutes just to chit chat, please do so. But yeah, officially our session has ended. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, wherever